The throne room erupted in chaos as King Roderick's hand cracked across Lavinia's face, the sting blooming like fire across her porcelain skin, her high collar slipping to reveal the fresh, iridescent mark glowing at the curve of her neck, a claiming bite that shattered every alliance and expectation in the hall. Nobles gasped, alliances crumbled, and her father's fury boiled over, but through the haze of pain, Lavinia felt a surge of defiant triumph, knowing this scar sealed her escape from a gilded cage into something far more perilous and profound. If this raw unveiling of secrets and power gripped your soul, hit subscribe now, because the truths unfolding next will bind you eternally to this saga of shadowed thrones and faded flames. The grand hall of Chateau Montfort thrummed with the weight of assembled nobility, their silken gowns and jeweled doublets catching the flicker of 100 candles suspended from vaulted ceilings like captured stars. Lavinia Beaumont stood at the heart of it all, her auburn waves pinned with pearls that gleamed against her pale skin, her posture a flawless mask of composure even as her storm-gray eyes betrayed the turmoil within. She had entered this chamber expecting tense diplomacy, but now, as her father, Duke Etienne, raised his hand in a flash of unchecked rage, the slap landed with a resounding crack that echoed off marble walls, sending her reeling. Pain flared across her cheek, hot and immediate, drawing a collective gasp from the crowd, lords and ladies frozen in scandalized horror. But worse than the sting was the slip of her high lace collar, tumbling aside to expose the shimmering mark at the base of her throat, a crescent-shaped bite, iridescent under the light, pulsing with an otherworldly glow that screamed ancient ritual and forbidden union. In that suspended moment, Lavinia's world fractured. Whispers erupted like a storm, acclaiming, "But who? She's ruined alliances." As Duke Etienne's face twisted from fury to dawning dread, his eyes locking on the mark that nullified every contract he'd forged. She touched her burning cheek, tasting blood from a split lip, but beneath the humiliation surged a fierce, unyielding spark. This was her defiance, her escape etched in flesh. The hall's opulent tapestries depicting werewolf hunts of old seemed to leer down, mocking the human pretenses crumbling around her. Through the haze, she sensed a distant pulse, like a second heartbeat syncing with hers, warm, protective, enraged, hinting at the stranger who had placed that mark under last night's moon. Duke Etienne seized her arm, his grip bruising. "What sorcery is this, girl? You've doomed us all." His voice boomed, but Lavinia met his glare with steady resolve, her voice a whisper that cut through the din. "No, father. I've freed myself." The nobles shifted uneasily, alliances teetering as guards tensed at the doors. She knew the truth would shatter everything. The man who had claimed her was no mere wanderer, but a force that could topple realms. Yet in this vulnerability, exposed and aching, Lavinia felt alive for the first time, her internal wound of years as a bargaining chip finally scarring over into strength. What would you do in this moment of raw exposure, when one mark changes your fate forever? Comment below and share your thoughts. Lavinia paced the shadowed confines of her chambers in Chateau Montfort, each measured step echoing too loudly against the stone floors. The hearth roared, yet the warmth never reached her bones. Firelight skittered across velvet drapes and gilded mirrors, fracturing her reflection into a dozen women, each wearing the same fine silk, each trapped. 3 days. That was all that remained before Duke Etienne delivered her, with practiced ceremony and public blessing, into the keeping of Count Gaspard. The thought turned her stomach. Gaspard was a relic embalmed in privilege, his breath sour with age and wine, his hands lingering too long when he thought no one watched. His estates lay deep in the mist-choked highlands, a place spoken of in lowered voices, where letters arrived late and left unanswered. Marriage to him was not union, it was erasure. At 21, Lavinia had been sculpted for this fate. She had learned to glide before she learned to run, to smile before she learned to speak her mind. Governesses corrected her posture with sharp taps of ivory rulers. Dancing masters pushed her until blood bloomed in her slippers. Every refinement had a price, and that price was choice. Her mother's death had sealed it all. Afterward, affection became transactional. Her father's praise came only when alliances were secured, when visiting dukes lingered approvingly over her bowed head and graceful replies. Love, she learned early, was something other people received. Yet beneath the polish, resentment had grown, quiet, patient, dangerous. She wanted little, really. Not titles. Not estates. Just autonomy. A life where her breath belonged to her alone. That hunger had found its spark in Julian. The huntsman moved through the estate like he belonged to the land itself, easy smiles, sharp eyes, laughter that cut through formality like sunlight through fog. Their first conversation had been accidental, a meeting beneath apple boughs heavy with fruit. After that came notes tucked into hollowed books, glances exchanged across courtyards, whispered promises beneath a scandalous moon. "We'll flee to the southern coasts," he had written, ink hurried and bold. "Where the sea forgets names and no one bows." Lavinia touched the sapphire locket at her throat, its cool weight grounding her. It had been her mother's, simple, unassuming, yet precious. To Lavinia, it represented something forbidden, inheritance without obligation. Still, doubt gnawed. Julian's affection burned hot, but briefly. His eyes sometimes lingered not on her face, but on the silk of her gown, the gold at her wrists. When he spoke of freedom, his voice thrilled, but his plans remained frustratingly vague. Was it love? Or merely escape dressed in devotion? Lavinia paced the shadowed confines of her chambers in Chateau Montfort, each measured step echoing too loudly against the stone floors. The hearth roared, yet the warmth never reached her bones. Firelight skittered across velvet drapes and gilded mirrors, fracturing her reflection into a dozen women, each wearing the same fine silk, each trapped. 3 days. That was all that remained before Duke Etienne delivered her, with practiced ceremony and public blessing, into the keeping of Count Gaspard. The thought turned her stomach. Gaspard was a relic embalmed in privilege, his breath sour with age and wine, his hands lingering too long when he thought no one watched. His estates lay deep in the mist-choked highlands, a place spoken of in lowered voices, where letters arrived late and left unanswered. Marriage to him was not union, it was erasure. At 21, Lavinia had been sculpted for this fate. She had learned to glide before she learned to run, to smile before she learned to speak her mind. Governesses corrected her posture with sharp taps of ivory rulers. Dancing masters pushed her until blood bloomed in her slippers. Every refinement had a price, and that price was choice. Her mother's death had sealed it all. Afterward, affection became transactional. Her father's praise came only when alliances were secured, when visiting dukes lingered approvingly over her bowed head and graceful replies. Love, she learned early, was something other people received. Yet beneath the polish, resentment had grown, quiet, patient, dangerous. She wanted little, really. Not titles. Not estates. Just autonomy. A life where her breath belonged to her alone. That hunger had found its spark in Julian. The huntsman moved through the estate like he belonged to the land itself, easy smiles, sharp eyes, laughter that cut through formality like sunlight through fog. Their first conversation had been accidental, a meeting beneath apple boughs heavy with fruit. After that came notes tucked into hollowed books, glances exchanged across courtyards, whispered promises beneath a scandalous moon. "We'll flee to the southern coasts," he had written, ink hurried and bold. "Where the sea forgets names and no one bows." Lavinia touched the sapphire locket at her throat, its cool weight grounding her. It had been her mother's, simple, unassuming, yet precious. To Lavinia, it represented something forbidden, inheritance without obligation. Still, doubt gnawed. Julian's affection burned hot, but briefly. His eyes sometimes lingered not on her face, but on the silk of her gown, the gold at her wrists. When he spoke of freedom, his voice thrilled, but his plans remained frustratingly vague. Was it love? Or merely escape dressed in devotion? Midnight draped the village of Eldridge in a hush so complete it felt deliberate, as though the world itself conspired to keep secrets. Fog rolled in from the riverbanks, thick and pearlescent, swallowing lamplight and softening edges until buildings became silhouettes and sound traveled strangely, distorted and intimate. The cobblestones glistened with dew, slick beneath Lavinia's hurried steps as she emerged from the castle's forgotten postern gate and pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders. For the first time in her life, no one watched her. The realization sent a tremor through her, half terror, half exhilaration. The air smelled of wet stone, wood smoke, and distant water, sharp and honest compared to the suffocating perfumes of Chateau Montfort. She breathed it in deeply, clutching the satchel at her side. The gems inside knocked softly against one another with each step, their weight steady and reassuring. This was not theft, she told herself. It was reclamation. Every shadow felt alive. Every footfall sounded too loud. She kept her head down, hood low, moving the way Colette had taught her, decisive, purposeful, never hesitating long enough to invite scrutiny. Somewhere behind her, bells might already be ringing. Somewhere, guards might already be counting heads. Ahead, the rusty lantern glowed like a promise. The inn squatted at the edge of the square, its windows throwing warm, flickering light into the fog. It was a place for traders, smugglers, men who preferred anonymity over comfort. Perfect, Julian had said. Travelers passed through nightly. No one would remember faces come morning. Lavinia's pulse quickened as she approached, anticipation and nerves tangling painfully in her chest. Then she heard the laughter. It burst through the fog, rough, careless, edged with cruelty. Lavinia slowed instinctively, her feet carrying her toward the shadow of a nearby rain barrel as something cold unfurled in her gut. She edged closer, heart hammering, and peered through a grimy pane clouded with age and smoke. Julian sat at a corner table. For a heartbeat, relief flared, he was here, after all. But it died as quickly as it came. He lounged back in his chair, tankard raised, his posture loose in a way she had never seen when he was with her. On either side of him sat two men she did not know, hard-looking, their faces etched with old scars, hands resting too close to weapons. Mercenaries. She recognized the type now with painful clarity. "The chit thinks I'm her knight," Julian sneered, draining his drink. His voice, so gentle in whispered vows, was sharp with mockery now. crawling through tunnels like a rat, handing over her pretty stones for true love. Laughter exploded from the table. One man slapped the wood hard enough to rattle the tankards. "We'll play the guards," another said, leaning in. "Lead her deep into the whispering woods. Strip her clean. Split the hull. Enough to buy ourselves names people bow to." Julian grinned, a cruel twist of a mouth she suddenly did not recognize. "She'll wail. They always do. But who's going to believe a runaway noble? By dawn, we'll be ghosts." The world tilted. The words hit Lavinia like ice driven beneath her skin, shock stealing the breath from her lungs. For a moment, she could not move. Months unraveled in an instant, the stolen glances, the fevered letters, the promises pressed into her palms beneath apple trees. Not love. Never love. A hunt. Her vision blurred as betrayal surged hot and nauseating, her hands trembling so violently she had to brace herself against the barrel to stay upright. The satchel at her side suddenly felt obscene, heavy with the proof of her foolishness. She backed away slowly, each step unsteady, until the fog swallowed the inn's windows and laughter faded into a dull roar in her ears. Panic clawed up her throat. There was no returning to the castle. By now, her absence would be discovered. The tunnels would be searched. Colette questioned. She was alone. Survival demanded motion. Swiping angrily at her tears, Lavinia turned and fled down a narrow alley, boots skidding on slick stone as she plunged deeper into the village's sleeping veins. Her thoughts fractured: hide, run, discard the satchel, don't be seen, but fear made every choice feel wrong. The fog thickened, muffling her sobs, closing around her like a living thing. She rounded a corner and collided with something solid. A sharp gasp tore from her as she stumbled backward, but strong hands caught her arms, steadying her before she could fall. The grip was firm, controlled, unmistakably deliberate. "Easy," a deep voice rumbled, low and calm, cutting through her panic like a blade through cloth. "You're safe." For the moment. Lavinia froze. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Piercing emerald eyes met hers, vivid even in the low light, set in a face carved with sharp lines and quiet authority. Raven dark hair brushed the collar of a finely tailored coat, its cut too precise for a common traveler, its fabric too rich for coincidence. He stood tall and broad-shouldered, radiating a presence that stilled the fog itself. "You're in distress," he said, not as a question, but an observation. His voice carried no mockery, no hunger, only alert concern. Shock warred with instinct. Every lesson screamed at her to pull away, to distrust strangers in the night. Yet something about him anchored her, an undercurrent of command and restraint that felt ancient. Dangerous. Safe. Her voice broke. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. "I can't stay here." His gaze flicked briefly down the alley behind her, then back to her face. "No," he agreed quietly. "You can't." The fog curled tighter around them, sealing the moment away from the rest of the world. Somewhere distant, a door slammed. Footsteps echoed, then faded. The man released her arms slowly, deliberately, as though aware of how close they stood. "You have enemies," he said. "And you have been betrayed." The accuracy sent a shiver through her. "Who are you?" Lavinia whispered. A pause. The faintest smile touched his mouth, not kind, not cruel, but knowing. Someone who recognizes a woman standing at the edge of ruin. In that suspended breath, something shifted inside her. The night no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a threshold. The stranger's eyes held Lavinia captive in the fog-shrouded alley, their emerald depths reflecting the torchlight like hidden forests alive with secrets. "Tell me," he urged softly, his voice a low timbre that cut through her chaos, "what drives a lady of evident grace to wander these perilous streets alone?" His posture was unyielding, broad shoulders squared as if accustomed to bearing kingdoms' weights, yet his touch on her arm was careful, almost reverent. Lavinia hesitated, the betrayal's sting still raw, but desperation overrode caution. Words tumbled forth, the forced betrothal to Count Gaspard, Julian's deceitful plot, the satchel of gems as her only leverage. "I've nothing left," she confessed, voice cracking. "No haven, no ally." He listened without interruption, his expression shifting from concern to a smoldering intensity that made her pulse quicken. "A grave injustice," he murmured, glancing at the inn where Julian's laughter still echoed faintly. When she finished, silence hung heavy, broken only by distant owl calls. Then, with trembling hands, Lavinia untied the satchel, offering its glittering contents. "Take it, all of it, if you'll wed me. A union would void my father's contracts." His brows arched in surprise, a faint amusement flickering, but not mockery, something deeper, like recognition. "You propose to a stranger?" he asked, his tone laced with intrigue. "Not just marriage," Lavinia pressed, drawing on half-remembered lore from her grandmother's tales of werewolf bonds. "A claiming right, eternal, unbreakable under ancient laws." He studied her, the air thickening with unspoken energy. "You understand its permanence? It binds souls, overrides all mortal pacts." She nodded, defiance blooming amid fear. After a weighted pause, he accepted the satchel, though his hold suggested it meant little. "Very well. But only if you're certain." Under the rising moon, in a secluded glade beyond the village, he performed the rite, a bite at her throat that flooded her with sensations, heat racing through veins, emotions not her own, protectiveness, certainty, merging like rivers. The bond snapped into place, a second heartbeat syncing with hers. As dawn approached, he arranged escorts back to the castle, promising reunion soon. Lavinia returned, the mark hidden, but tensions mounted, Colette's worried questions, guards' suspicious glances, her father's agitated summons for diplomatic arrivals. Through the bond, she felt his presence, strong, reassuring, yet obstacles loomed, whispers of unrest in the halls, Julian's lingering shadow, and the creeping dread of revelation. Hope flickered, frustration gnawed, each hour deepened their invisible tie, pulling her toward an unknown horizon fraught with passion's promise. The great hall of Chateau Montfort pulsed with anticipation as Lavinia descended the grand staircase, her emerald gown whispering against the stone, the high collar concealing the throbbing mark at her throat. Nobles milled about, their conversations a buzz of speculation over the arriving dignitary, a sovereign from the veiled kingdom of Shadowfen, rumored to wield primal powers that bent borders and beasts alike. Duke Etienne paced the dais, his face etched with strain. This negotiation could forge or fracture his domain. Lavinia took her assigned place among the courtiers, her cheeks still tender from imagined slaps of fate, but through the bond, a warm assurance pulsed, her stranger drawing near. Count Gaspard leered from across the room, his beady eyes raking her form, while Julian lurked among the servants, his wink a poisoned dart that ignited fury in her chest. Then, chaos erupted. An overzealous attendant adjusted her collar, gasping at the revealed mark. Acclaiming. The word rippled outward, freezing the assembly. Duke Etienne stormed forward, yanking the fabric aside. Treachery, he roared, his slap landing with brutal force, stars exploding in Lavinia's vision. Pain radiated, but so did a violent echo through the bond, fury, unbridled and regal. The doors burst open, and he entered, not the cloaked wanderer, but King Beaumont, no, King Alistair of Shadowfen, resplendent in obsidian and silver regalia, his raven hair crowned with thorns, emerald eyes ablaze. Guards flanked him, banners unfurling like dark wings. The hall knelt in waves, Duke Etienne collapsing to his knees. Alistair's gaze locked on Lavinia, striding through the parting crowd with predatory grace. He cupped her stinging cheek, his touch a balm amid rage. Who dared, he demanded, voice thundering. Fingers trembling, Duke Etienne confessed, terror paling his features. She is mine, Alistair declared, exposing the mark fully. My claimed consort, overriding all pacts. Gasps echoed, betrayals unveiled, alliances shattered. Lavinia's world spun, the man she'd bartered with was sovereign, his acceptance a veil over destiny. Through the bond, passion surged, betrayal's sting from her offer's irony, yet his respect burned true. Gaspard fled, Julian cowered, stakes soared as realms teetered. In this vortex of revelation, Lavinia confronted her vulnerability, the bond deepening into undeniable fire. Would you trust a king after such a concealed truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. Dawn crept into the guest chambers like an unwelcome witness, pale light seeping through the tall windows and laying bare the wreckage of Lavinia's night. She had not slept. Each time her eyes closed, memories surged back, Julian's laughter, the cold authority in her father's voice, Alistair's silence that felt heavier than any shout. The bruise on her cheek had deepened, a dark bloom she avoided touching, as though acknowledging it would make everything real in a way she wasn't ready to face. She rose slowly, wrapping herself in a shawl that smelled faintly of lavender, a detail meant to soothe guests. It only sharpened her bitterness. This castle was no sanctuary, it was a crossroads where every path demanded a price. Through the bond, Alistair's presence stirred again, muted now, restrained, as if he had locked his own emotions behind iron doors. That restraint hurt more than his anger had. It felt like distance chosen, not forced. A soft knock sounded. Colette entered with a tray, her movements careful, eyes darting as though the walls themselves might listen. They're calling councils at every hour, she murmured. Some say the nobles want blood. Others say they want you sent away quietly, before things worsen. Sent where? Lavinia asked, her voice hoarse. Colette hesitated. Anywhere but here. The words landed with cruel simplicity. Lavinia dismissed her maid gently and moved to the window, staring out at the inner courtyard where banners stirred in the morning breeze. Soldiers crossed in disciplined lines. Life continued, indifferent to her unraveling. She pressed her palm to the glass, grounding herself. If she allowed despair to hollow her out now, she would become exactly what everyone expected, a frightened girl shuffled between men of power. Later that day, a summons arrived. Not a command, an invitation. Alistair awaited her in the eastern solar, a neutral space overlooking the river gorge. When she entered, he stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him. The sight of him, so controlled, so solitary, tightened something in her chest. I should have told you who I was, he said without turning. Before the bond. Before everything. Yes, she replied, steady despite the tremor inside her. You should have. He faced her then, emerald eyes stripped of arrogance, lined instead with something like shame. I will not force you to stay. Whatever my counsel demands, whatever your father threatens, you will choose. I swear it. Silence stretched between them, fragile and charged. Lavinia searched his face, weighing truth against fear. The bond warmed, not possessive now, but tentative, an offering rather than a chain. For the first time since the night began, she felt something other than loss. I don't know what I want yet, she said finally. But I won't beg for mercy. Not from you. Not from anyone. A faint, solemn nod was his answer. As she left the solar, Lavinia understood this was not an ending but a threshold. Her old life lay in ruins behind her, but ahead, uncertain, dangerous, and uncharted, was a future she might finally shape with her own hands. The spark within her, bruised but not broken, flared once more. Isolation gripped Lavinia like iron chains as she retreated to the guest chambers Alistair commanded, the door closing with a finality that echoed her fracturing spirit. The room's opulence, silk canopies, flickering lanterns, felt mocking, a gilded prison mirroring her life's illusions. Her cheek throbbed, a purple bruise blooming under Alistair's earlier touch, but the real agony pulsed deeper, humiliation from offering gems to a king who needed none, anger at his withheld identity, despair over bridges burned with her father. Through the bond, his emotions battered her, regret mingled with possessiveness, but it only amplified her isolation, a cacophony in her soul. You deceived me, she whispered to the empty air, sinking onto the bed, tears tracing silent paths. Memories assaulted, Julian's mockery, Duke Etienne's slap, the hall's judgmental stares. What if this bond was another cage? Alistair's power loomed insurmountable, his kingdom's laws could bind her eternally, stripping choices she'd fought to claim. Colette slipped in, her face etched with worry. My lady, the castle whispers of war, your father rages in his study. Lavinia nodded numbly, the weight of consequences crushing, alliances severed, her name tainted as a reckless claimant. Julian's arrest orders circulated, but satisfaction eluded her, betrayal's wound festered, hopelessness seeping in. Night fell, shadows lengthening like accusations. Lavinia paced, the mark heating with Alistair's distant fury during negotiations, echoes of arguments over her ruin. Doubt clawed, had she traded one tyrant for another? A missive arrived from Duke Etienne, scrawled in shaking script, you've destroyed our legacy. Beg his mercy or face disownment. The words struck like daggers, plunging her into abyss, family fractured, future uncertain. Alone, she curled on the floor, sobs racking her frame, the bond a tether that both comforted and confined. In this nadir, all seemed lost, autonomy illusory, love a mirage, her courage a fleeting spark extinguished by overwhelming odds. Dawn's pale light filtered through the chamber windows, rousing Lavinia from fitful sleep, her body aching but resolve stirring like embers in ash. The bond hummed with Alistair's presence, contrite, steadfast, urging her toward confrontation. She rose, summoning Colette to prepare a gown of defiant crimson, the color of spilled wine and reclaimed power. No more hiding, she declared, touching the mark that now felt like armor rather than a scar. Insights crystallized, Julian's greed exposed her naivety, but Alistair's secrecy stemmed from protection, not malice. Through their link, She glimpsed his fears, of rejection, of fate's weight, and it ignited empathy, bridging her isolation. Venturing to the courtyard, Lavinia found Alastair amid his retinue, his emerald eyes softening at her approach. "We must speak," she said firmly, leading him to a secluded arbor where vines twisted like forgotten promises. Words poured, anger at his deception, pain from her father's blow, but also acknowledgement of her impulsive proposal's irony. "You saw me as equal in that moment," he admitted, vulnerability cracking his regal facade. "Not a crown to conquer." Their hands met, the bond surging with mutual realizations, her flaw of blind trust transforming into discerning strength, his guarded heart opening to partnership. "Forgive me," he whispered, and she did, not wholly, but enough to forge ahead. Irreversible choice loomed: confront Duke Etienne and Julien publicly, sealing her new path. Together, Alastair agreed, pride warming the link. They rallied guards, summoning a trial. Hope bloomed, courage reborn from despair's forge. Subplots intertwined, Colette revealed hidden loyalties, offering evidence against Julien's plot. As they strode back, Lavinia felt unbreakable, the turning point crystallizing, from victim to architect of destiny, reuniting with Alastair not as savior and saved, but equals bound by choice. The hall brimmed with tension, nobles and commoners alike pressed shoulder to shoulder, the air thick with murmurs and the scent of beeswax candles. Lavinia ascended the dais beside Alastair, her crimson gown a banner of defiance, the mark proudly displayed. "This trial commences," Alastair proclaimed, his voice a thunderclap silencing the crowd. Guards hauled Julien forward, chains clinking, his once charming face now ashen with dread. "You schemed against my consort," Alastair accused, emerald eyes flashing. Julien stammered denials, but witnesses emerged, innkeepers recounting overheard plots, Colette producing pilfered letters exposing his greed. Heroic twists unfolded, Lavinia stepped forth, confronting Julien directly. "Your lies nearly broke me," she declared, voice steady, "but they forged my strength." The bond pulsed with Alastair's support, fueling her. Julien lunged in desperation, a hidden dagger flashing, but Alastair intercepted with primal speed, disarming him in a blur. Chaos peaked, guards clashing with Julien's concealed allies erupting from the crowd, swords ringing. Lavinia seized a fallen blade, defending Colette, her movements instinctive through the bond's shared fury. Alastair's roar echoed, commanding submission, foes yielded, the hall subdued. Payoff detonated, Julien confessed, banished eternally. Duke Etienne, summoned, faced Alastair's wrath but Lavinia intervened, demanding a renunciation document. Trembling, he signed, severing claims. Emotional triumph surged, relief washing over Lavinia as justice prevailed, her wounds avenged. In the aftermath's hush, Alastair drew her close, their kiss a seal of victory amid cheers. Peace settled over Chateau Montfort like a gentle dawn, the trial's echoes fading into renewed alliances as Shadowfen's banners intertwined with local crests. Lavinia stood on the battlements with Alastair, the wind tousling her auburn hair, the bond a harmonious hum of shared joy and growth. Subplots resolved, Colette was elevated to court advisor, her loyalty rewarded, distant kin sent missives of support, mending familial rifts on Lavinia's terms. Duke Etienne, humbled, retreated to his estates, his apology a seed for tentative reconciliation, letters exchanged, boundaries respected. Lavinia's arc culminated in empowerment, from commodified daughter to sovereign consort, her flaw of impulsive trust evolved into wise discernment. Alistair, too, transformed, his guarded heart open, ruling with her counsel. They departed for Shadowfen in a grand procession, the carriage rolling through blooming fields, promises of a shared throne ahead. Intimacy deepened in quiet moments, whispered vows under starlit skies, hands entwined, the marca eternal emblem of chosen love. Hope radiated, realms united, personal scars healed into strengths. Lavinia touched the sapphire locket, now symbolizing not loss, but legacy forged anew. To the future, she murmured, Alistair's smile mirroring her fulfillment. In this new status quo, love triumphed, a beacon for all. How did this ending resonate with you? Triumph after turmoil? Comment below and subscribe for more tales of destiny and desire.